Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The coffee maker gurgled at 6:15, same as every morning for the past 6 months. Ronan Ellery sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from him. Lita's chair. The wood grain beneath his fingers felt rough where she used to rest her elbows while reading the morning news on her tablet. His coffee had gone cold again. Third time this week. Ronan dumped it in the sink and poured a fresh cup, black as always. Lita used to tease him about drinking motor oil, said a little cream wouldn't kill him. She'd been wrong about a lot of things, as it turned out. Outside the kitchen window, the North Carolina mountains rolled away in waves of green. Asheville sprawled in the valley below, but up here on the ridge, silence ruled everything. The kind of silence that made a man think too much. Ronan preferred it that way. Always had. Even when Lita was alive, he'd grown up in silence. His parents had been the type who communicated through slammed doors and unpaid bills. Talking was for other families, the kind that ate dinner together and asked about homework. Ronan learned early that words were just another way to lie to people. That's why Lita's chatter had surprised him when they first met. She'd talk about anything: the weather, politics, some documentary she'd watched about penguins. Real conversations, the kind he'd seen in movies but never experienced. For 8 years, she'd filled the silence in his life. Now the silence was back, and it felt heavier than before. He sipped his black coffee and scanned the real estate listings on his laptop. The house was too big for one person. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and that damn garage Lita had claimed for her own projects. He'd respected her space, never pushed. Marriage was about boundaries, she'd said. Everyone needed a place that was purely their own. Now the locked door mocked him every time he walked past. Time to move on, he muttered, closing the laptop with more force than necessary. Ronan stood and walked to the living room window. His reflection stared back, 42 years old, graying at the temples, shoulders still broad from decades of lifting aircraft parts. His hands bore permanent stains from hydraulic fluid and grease, marks that soap couldn't erase. Mechanic's hands. Honest hands. Those hands had never touched Lita's garage door handle. He'd worked 23 years maintaining helicopters at the regional airport before an injury forced early retirement. Rotator cuff surgery, followed by arthritis that made his joints ache when rain was coming. The settlement money had been enough to buy this place outright. No mortgage, no monthly payments hanging over his head like a sword. Lita had picked it out, said the mountain air would help his joints. She'd been right about that, at least. The pain was manageable up here, away from the humidity of the valley. The phone rang, cutting through his thoughts. Ronan glanced at the caller, ID Jim Morrison from Asheville Realty. Not the singer, Jim always joked. Just a guy trying to make a living selling houses to folks who wanted to escape city life. Morning, Jim. Ronan, hope I'm not calling too early. I got a bite on your listing. Family from Charlotte wants to see the place this weekend. Can you have everything ready? Ronan looked toward the hallway that led to the garage entrance. The door stood like a barrier between his old life and whatever came next. Define everything. Well, they'll want to see all the spaces. Storage areas, garage, basement. You know how buyers they want to imagine their stuff in every corner. Wife's already asking about workshop space for her husband's woodworking hobby. Right. Ronan rubbed his jaw, feeling the scratch of morning stubble. I'll make sure it's accessible. Great. Saturday, at 2 work for you? They're driving up Friday night, staying at that bed and breakfast on Mountain View Road. Yeah, Saturday's fine. Excellent. This could be the one, Ronan. They're pre-approved, cash buyers, looking to close fast. Mountain properties like yours don't come along often. After hanging up, Ronan walked to the garage door. The deadbolt was heavy-duty, installed by Lita herself 3 years ago. She'd said she needed a secure workspace for freelance graphic design projects. Made sense at the time. Lita was meticulous about her client files, always worried about data theft and corporate espionage. But the lock seemed excessive for a home office. Industrial grade, the kind used on commercial buildings. Ronan tried the handle anyway, knowing it wouldn't turn. It didn't. He pressed his ear to the door and heard nothing but the whisper of mountain wind through the eaves. The door itself was solid wood, thick enough to muffle any sounds from inside. "What were you hiding, Lita?" The question had haunted him since the funeral. Everyone said she'd been lucky if an aneurysm had to take her. At least it happened in her sleep. No pain, no suffering. Just gone between one breath and the next, like a candle being blown out. But Lita had been healthy. 41 years old, ran 5 miles every morning before the sun came up, ate vegetables Ronan couldn't pronounce. Her annual checkups had been clean, perfect blood pressure, low cholesterol, heart rate of an athlete. The aneurysm came from nowhere, the doctors said. Sometimes these things just happen. Random, unpredictable, acts of God, they called them. Ronan didn't believe in coincidences. 23 years of aviation maintenance had taught him that systems failed for reasons. Metal fatigue from repeated stress cycles, design flaws that became apparent over time, human error during installation or repair. There's always a cause, even when it wasn't immediately obvious. That he went to the kitchen and pulled a toolbox from under the sink. Inside, among wrenches and screwdrivers worn smooth from decades of use, lay a pair of bolt cutters. He'd bought them to trim branches from the power line after a storm, but never used them. The metal felt cold and heavy in his hands. Time to break down a door. The bolt cutters made quick work of the deadbolt. Metal sheared with a sharp crack that echoed off the mountains and sent a flock of crows into the air. Ronan pushed the door open and stepped inside, his heart hammering against his ribs. The smell hit him first, not the mustiness he'd expected, but something crisp and organized, like a clean office or a laboratory. Air conditioning hummed quietly, keeping the space cool despite the summer heat outside. He found the light switch and fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, revealing something that made his breath catch in his throat. This wasn't a garage anymore. The space had been transformed into something between a workshop and a command center. File cabinets lined the far wall, each drawer labeled with dates spanning 8 years. A large corkboard covered the left wall, pinned with photographs, maps, and handwritten notes connected by colored string like something from a detective show. In the center of the room sat a desk with 3 computer monitors. All dark now, but the setup looked professional. Expensive. The kind of equipment he'd seen in air traffic control towers. That Ronan's legs felt unsteady as he approached the corkboard first. The photographs were surveillance shots, people entering buildings, sitting in restaurants, walking through parking lots. Long-range shots taken with serious equipment, the kind used by private investigators or government agencies. Each photo was labeled with dates and GPS coordinates in Lita's precise handwriting. The handwriting he'd seen on grocery lists and birthday cards for 8 years. One photo made his blood freeze in his veins. IT showed him and Lita at their anniversary dinner last year. Romano's Italian restaurant on Pack Square. They were laughing at something she'd said about the waiter's mustache, holding hands across the checkered tablecloth. Ronan remembered the moment she'd been wearing the blue dress he liked, the one that brought out her eyes, but someone had drawn a red X across his face with a marker. Violent slashes that tore through the photograph. His hand shook as he unpinned the photo. On the back, Lita had written, "Ronan never the target." What the hell, Lita? His voice echoed in the space, sounding strange and hollow. He turned to scan the rest of the board. Names he didn't recognize were written in block letters and connected to various photos with different colored strings. Miles Kettering, Nova Beringer, Silas Red, Caro Fleet, Rowan Slate. Under each name, question marks and dollar signs filled the margins in red ink. The connections formed a web across the entire board, with lines crisscrossing and overlapping like a spider's trap. The file cabinets drew him next. The first drawer he tried was unlocked, sliding open with a whisper of well-oiled rails. Inside, manila folders were organized by aliases and dates. The names on the tabs weren't Lita's, or at least not the name he'd known. Linda Ellis, Laura Emerson, Lisa Everly, all variations of Ellie, all with complete documentation, driver's licenses, passports, social security cards. The photos showed Lita with different hair colors and styles, brunette, blonde, even a striking redhead, but it was definitely her. Same green eyes, same small scar on her chin from a childhood bicycle accident. His wife had been living under false identities for years. Ronan pulled out one of the passports with trembling fingers. It was Canadian, issued to Lisa Everly 3 years ago. High-quality work, the kind that would pass any inspection. The stamp marks showed travel to Mexico, Colombia, and several Caribbean islands. Dates when Lita had supposedly been at graphic design conferences in Atlanta and Miami. She'd been lying to him for their entire marriage. The desk held more surprises. The drawers contained burner phones still in their packaging, USB drives labeled with cryptic numbers, and encrypted hard drives that hummed when he touched them. But one item stood out, a note in Lita's handwriting, taped to the underside of the middle drawer. If you're reading this, I'm gone. The password is in the clock. It's all numbers. Look at the clock you gave me. Ronan turned toward the wall behind the desk. There hung the anniversary clock he'd given Lita 2 years ago, a simple digital timepiece that displayed the date and time. He bought it because she was always running late, always checking her phone for the time. But instead of showing the current time, it was frozen at 14:26:39. That he memorized the numbers and turned his attention to the main computer. A single hard drive sat connected to the primary monitor, labeled in red marker. Do not open unless I'm gone. The warning sent ice through his veins. Lita had known she might die. This wasn't a sudden aneurysm. This was preparation for an expected outcome. His wife had been planning for her own death. The computer booted to a password screen with a blinking cursor that seemed to mock him. Ronan typed in the time from the clock, 14:26:39. The screen unlocked with a soft chime, revealing a desktop filled with folders marked by years and locations. Each folder contained dozens of files, more information than he could process in a day. But one file sat separate from the rest, positioned prominently in the center of the screen. Read_first.txt. Ronan double-clicked it, his mouse hand slick with sweat. If I'm gone, it's because I crossed them. You were never the target. But you were never supposed to know that I thought I could protect you by keeping you in the dark. I was wrong. Once you open this, there's no going back. They'll know someone has the files. That I'm sorry for lying to you. I'm sorry for everything. The truth is in the evidence folder. That I love you. The words blurred as Ronan read them twice, then a third time. Each sentence hit like a physical blow, rewriting everything he thought he knew about his marriage. He navigated to the evidence folder with movements that felt mechanical, disconnected from his body. Inside were hundreds of files organized by name. The same 5 names from the corkboard had their own subfolders, each containing what looked like years of accumulated intelligence. He clicked on Miles Kettering first, his cursor hovering over the folder like a weapon. The folder contained bank statements showing millions in transactions to offshore accounts in countries he'd never heard of. Photos of Kettering meeting with various officials in what looked like private settings, restaurants, hotel lobbies, parking garages. But the most damning file was a video labeled Kettering_confession.mp4. Ronan's heart hammered as he played the video. It showed Kettering in what looked like a hotel room, sitting on a bed and talking to someone off camera, presumably Lita. The operation runs itself now, Kettering was saying. His voice was smooth, educated, the kind that belonged in boardrooms and charity galas. We process about 200 kids a year through the charity network. The families think their children are going to summer camps and educational programs. By the time they realize what's happening, the kids are already overseas. Ronan's stomach twisted into knots. He paused the video and stared at Kettering's face, middle-aged, distinguished, the kind of man who would inspire trust in desperate parents. How do you sleep at night? Lita's voice asked from off-camera. Kettering laughed. Very well, actually. We're providing a service. Supply and demand. These kids are going nowhere anyway. Broken homes, drug-addicted parents, futures in welfare systems, or juvenile detention. We give them value. Purpose. You're talking about human trafficking. I'm talking about business. The market exists whether we participate or not. At least we run a clean operation. Ronan felt bile rise in his throat. He closed the video and opened the next folder, Nova Beringer. More of the same financial records, photographs, audio recordings. Nova Beringer was the district attorney, the one who'd built her career on anti-corruption campaigns. Her face was familiar from campaign posters and news interviews, always talking about protecting the innocent and bringing criminals to justice. The irony made Ronan physically sick. An audio file labeled Beringer Orders to Wave contained a phone conversation between Beringer and an unknown male voice. "The Ellery woman is becoming a problem," Beringer's voice said. Even through the compression, her tone was cold and businesslike. "She's asking too many questions, wants out of the arrangement. We can't have her talking." "What do you want me to do about it?" the male voice asked. "Make it look natural. Medical emergency, accident, something that won't draw attention. She's already established a pattern of health consciousness, so a sudden medical event will be believable. Consider it done." The file was dated 3 days before Lita's death. Ronan slammed his fist on the desk. The monitor shook but didn't fall. Pain shot through his knuckles, but it felt distant compared to the rage building in his chest. His wife hadn't died from a random aneurysm. She'd been murdered. He opened file after file, each one revealing more horrors. The 5 names on the corkboard were part of a trafficking ring that used charitable organizations as fronts. They moved children through a network of fake summer camps and educational programs, shipping them overseas to buyers who paid millions for young lives. Lita had been part of it once. Her role was clear from the files. She'd used her identity-switching skills to move money and coordinate logistics. Financial records showed payments to Laura Emerson and Lisa Everly for services rendered over several years, but something had changed her mind. The later files showed her documenting everything, gathering evidence, preparing to expose them all. She'd been building a case, one piece at a time, that they'd killed her for it. A final folder labeled _ confession contained a video file dated 1 week before Lita's death. Ronan's hands trembled as he clicked play. Lita's face filled the screen. She looked exhausted, scared. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't been sleeping. Behind her was a garage wall, the same corkboard visible in the background. "My name is Lita Ellery," she began, her voice shaking. "My real name is Lita Emerson. For 8 years, I worked for an organization that trafficked children through charitable foundations. I helped them because I thought I was saving these kids from bad situations. I was wrong." She paused to wipe tears from her eyes with the back of her hand. "I made them powerful. I helped them hide what they did. I thought I could fix it from the inside, gather evidence, expose them all. But they found out. They're going to kill me." The camera shook as Lita leaned forward, her face filling the frame. "If something happens to me, it wasn't natural. Nova Beringer ordered it. Miles Kettering approved it. They have people who make these things look like accidents. Don't trust the police, they have people there too. Officials in Asheville, maybe higher up." She looked directly into the camera, and for a moment it felt like she was speaking directly to him across the months. "Ronan, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. You deserved better than a wife who lied to you every day. But you were the only real thing in my fake life. The only person who loved me for who I really was, even though I never let you see who that was." Her voice broke completely. "I want to tell you. Every day, I wanted to tell you everything. But I was afraid you'd leave me, or worse, that they'd hurt you too. I thought I could handle it alone. I thought I could protect you by keeping you ignorant." She wiped her nose with a tissue. "I was selfish. I wanted to keep you safe, but I also wanted to keep you. You were the first good thing that ever happened to me. I couldn't bear to lose that." The video ended abruptly. Ronan sat in the darkness of the garage for a long time, processing what he'd learned. His wife had been a criminal who'd tried to become a whistleblower. She'd been murdered for her trouble, and now he was the only person who knew the truth. The rational part of his mind said to take everything to the FBI. Box up the files, call the field office in Charlotte, let the professionals handle it. But Lita's warnings about corrupt officials made him hesitate. How deep did this conspiracy go? Who could he trust? If they had people in local law enforcement, they might have people at higher levels too. And even if he could trust the authorities, what then? Years of investigations, trials, appeals. Justice delayed and potentially denied while children continued to disappear into their network. Nobody. He could trust nobody but himself. Ronan began copying files to USB drives, working methodically through the night. If they wanted to play games, he'd play. But he'd play by his own rules, using their own methods against them. The mechanic had found a broken system. Time to tear it apart and build something better. Ronan spent 3 days studying Lita's files like they were technical manuals. He set up a secure workspace in the basement, moving the hard drives and documents away from the garage. If anyone came looking, they'd find an empty room with fresh vacuum tracks on the carpet. The pattern became clear as he analyzed the data with the same systematic approach he'd used to diagnose aircraft problems. 5 core members ran the operation like a machine, each with a specific function. Miles Kettering was the public-face CEO of Future Hope Foundation, a tech nonprofit that supposedly provided computers and internet access to underprivileged children. The foundation's website was professional, filled with smiling children and inspiring success stories. In reality, it was a recruitment tool. Social workers identified vulnerable kids from broken homes, then offered them spots in special programs that promised education, mentorship, and opportunity. Once the children were in the system, they disappeared. Nova Beringer provided legal protection as district attorney. Her anti-corruption campaigns were theater, designed to deflect attention from her real activities. She'd prosecuted rival organizations while protecting the trafficking network, using her position to suppress investigations and intimidate potential witnesses. Senator Silas Redd controlled the political aspects. His clean politics image was another facade. He'd authored bills that increased funding for children's charities while reducing oversight requirements. His legislation had made their operation possible. Carol Fleet ran the ground operations as a youth counselor. She identified targets, convinced parents to sign over temporary custody for summer programs, and managed the transport logistics. Her psychological evaluations determined which children would be easiest to control. Rowan Slate handled cybersecurity and communications. He'd created the encrypted systems they used to coordinate shipments and payments, built firewalls around their financial transactions, and managed their digital identities. Each of them was wealthy, powerful, and protected by layers of legitimate business and political connections. Taking them down would require more than evidence. It would require destroying their credibility and turning them against each other. Ronan studied their psychological profiles from Lita's notes. She'd been thorough, documenting their personalities, fears, and pressure points like a behavioral analyst. Miles was paranoid about competitors stealing his ideas or market share. Nova was obsessed with her public image and future political ambitions. Silas feared scandal above all else, having built his career on moral authority. Caro was greedy and reckless with money. Rowan was arrogant and prone to mistakes when his ego was challenged. Perfect. Ronan could work with this. He started with small moves, like loosening bolts on an aircraft engine to see what would fail first. Anonymous emails to financial journalists, hinting at irregularities in Future Hope Foundation's books. Tips to political bloggers about meetings between Beringer and known crime figures. Nothing traceable, nothing that would immediately expose the trafficking operation, but enough to make them nervous. The first results appeared within a week. A financial blog published a piece questioning Future Hope's spending patterns. The article noted that while the foundation claimed to serve thousands of children, very few success stories could be verified. The author raised questions about administrative costs that seemed excessive for a nonprofit. Miles Kettering responded with a press conference, angrily denying any wrongdoing. But Ronan noticed something in the man's eyes during the televised statement: fear. The kind of fear that came from knowing the accusations were true. Good. Fear made people make mistakes. Ronan's second phase was more targeted. He learned to think like Lita, using her methods, but adapting them to his own skills. Where she'd been subtle and patient, building relationships over years, he was direct and relentless. He hacked into Rowan Slate's personal email using techniques Lita had documented in her files. The man used the same password for everything, a fatal flaw for someone supposedly skilled in cybersecurity. His password was R0W4N-Cell4T3, with numbers replacing letters, the kind of basic substitution that any hacking program could crack in minutes. The emails contained months of coordination between the 5 conspirators, including detailed discussions about containment and problem solving, references to Lita as the liability, and discussions about permanent solutions. Ronan leaked select emails to IRS whistleblower programs, choosing messages that reference financial irregularities without revealing the full scope of the trafficking operation. He wanted them to feel pressure from multiple directions, like an aircraft losing hydraulic systems one at a time. Then he got creative. Using Slate's own email account, Ronan sent a message to Nova Beringer. "We need to meet. Miles is talking to federal investigators. He's trying to cut a deal. Says he has evidence against all of us." The message wasn't true, but it didn't need to be. Ronan watched through surveillance cameras. He'd accessed another gift from Slate's poor security practices as Beringer spent the next day making frantic phone calls from her office. He could read her lips through the camera. "That bastard," she said into her phone. "I knew we couldn't trust him." 2 days later, he sent another email from a different compromised account to Miles Kettering. "Nova's been asking questions about your offshore accounts. Someone's been talking to the feds. She mentioned your Cayman Island deposits specifically." The paranoia spread like wildfire through a dry forest. Within a week, the 5 conspirators were meeting more frequently, their communications becoming more heated. Ronan intercepted several angry exchanges between Kettering and Beringer, each accusing the other of being careless. "You promised me this was secure," Beringer's voice said in one recorded phone call. "Now I've got federal auditors asking about campaign contributions that don't add up." "Don't blame me for your sloppy bookkeeping," Kettering replied. "Maybe if you weren't so greedy about the kickbacks." "Greedy? You're the one with 17 offshore accounts." But the real breakthrough came when Ronan accessed Caro Fleet's financial records. The woman was sloppy with money, leaving electronic trails everywhere. She'd been skimming from the operation for years, hiding millions in personal accounts under her daughter's name. Ronan packaged the evidence and sent it anonymously to all 4 of her partners with a simple message. "Thought you should know where your missing money went." The result was explosive. Within hours, angry phone calls flew between the conspirators. Fleet accused them of framing her to cover their own theft. Kettering demanded she return the money immediately. Beringer threatened to have her arrested for embezzlement. "I've been taking my fair share," Fleet screamed in her phone during one conversation Ronan recorded. "You think I'm stupid? I know what you all make from this operation." Their unity was fracturing exactly as Ronan had planned, but his actions came with consequences. 3 weeks after he'd started his campaign, Ronan returned home to find his front door standing open. The deadbolt was intact, the frame undamaged. Someone with serious skills had picked the lock. The house had been searched professionally, but not perfectly. Furniture was slightly out of place, drawers not quite closed properly, books on shelves arranged differently than he'd left them. They'd been looking for something specific, but they'd been careful not to leave obvious signs of intrusion. Ronan went to the basement. His equipment was untouched, hidden behind a false wall he'd built years ago for tool storage. But the message was clear. They knew someone was hunting them. That night, Ronan packed everything essential into a duffel bag and moved to a motel outside town. The Mountain View Inn, a rundown place that rented rooms by the week and didn't ask too many questions about identification. He paid cash and registered under a false name. The house was compromised. They'd be watching it now, waiting for him to return. The escalation forced him to accelerate his timeline. He uploaded everything he'd gathered to multiple cloud storage accounts, then prepared a dead man's switch if he didn't check in every 48 hours. The files would automatically be sent to journalists and law enforcement agencies nationwide. That IT was time to take bigger risks, that Ronan's escalation had a price. He learned about it when he drove past Augie's house on his way to check the mail at his old address. Augie Morrison lived next door, a retired teacher who'd been Ronan's closest friend since moving to the mountains. They'd spent countless evenings on Augie's porch, drinking beer and complaining about the state of education, politics, and the world in general. Augie was one of the few people who genuinely cared about Ronan after Lita's death, bringing casseroles and checking in regularly. Police cars surrounded the house. An ambulance was pulling away, no lights, no sirens. The kind of departure that meant the passenger was beyond help. Ronan parked down the street and approached a neighbor. He recognized Mrs. Chun, an elderly woman who ran a small vegetable garden and seemed to know everyone's business. "What happened to Augie?" The woman shook her head sadly, her weathered hands twisting a dish towel. Suicide, they're saying. Hung himself in the barn. Such a shame, he seemed to be doing better lately. Had a spring in his step, you know? Even asked about my grandson's college plans last week. Ronan's blood went cold. Augie Morrison was the least suicidal person he'd ever known. The man had survived cancer, divorce, and the death of his only son in Afghanistan. He'd buried his wife of 30 years and kept teaching until mandatory retirement. He wasn't the type to give up on life. When did they find him? This morning around 10. Mailman noticed the barn door was open, went to check on him. Poor Jerry's been delivering mail for 20 years, says he's never seen anything like it. Did he leave a note? Mrs. Chin's expression darkened. That's the strange thing. No note, no explanation. Augie was the type who'd organize his sock drawer before doing something like that. Doesn't seem right, you know. That evening, after the police and coroner had left, Ronan used his key to enter Augie's property. His friend had given him access years ago for emergencies, back when they'd joked about getting old and needing someone to check on each other. The barn was empty now, but Ronan could see scuff marks on the floor where a struggle had occurred. Boot prints in the dirt, disturbed hay, an overturned stool that didn't match the suicide narrative. Augie wouldn't have gone quietly. Behind the barn, partially hidden by tall grass and weeds, Ronan found what he was looking for. Scratched into the dirt with a stick or finger were 2 letters. L.E. Lita's initials. Augie had tried to leave a message before they killed him. But what was he trying to say? Ronan searched the property methodically, using a flashlight to check every hiding place he could think of. Under the back porch, where Augie used to hide a spare key, he found something else, a loose floorboard that revealed a small cavity underneath. Inside was a manila envelope with Ronan's name written in Augie's familiar handwriting. The envelope contained a USB drive and a note. Ronan, your wife, came to see me 2 weeks before she died. She was scared, said people were following her. She gave me this drive and told me to give it to you if anything happened to her. I thought she was being paranoid, but after what happened to you both, I started asking questions around town. That was a mistake. They came for me tonight. 3 men, professional types. I managed to scratch your wife's initials in the dirt before they. I'm sorry I waited so long. Should have given this to you months ago. Ronan's hand shook as he plugged the USB drive into his laptop. It contained a single video file, larger than the others he'd seen. Lita's face appeared on screen again. But this recording was different from her confession. She looked calmer, more resolved. Behind her was a different location, what looked like a hotel room. Ronan, if Augie gave you this, it means they got to me, and now they're coming for anyone who might know the truth. I hid this with him because I knew you'd check on him if something happened. She held up a photograph, the same picture of their anniversary dinner. But this copy didn't have the X marked across Ronan's face. I marked your face on the copy in the garage to make them think you were never important to me. I thought it might protect you. But if you're watching this, my plan failed. Lita's expression hardened. And for the first time, Ronan saw the woman she must have been before he met her: cold, calculating, dangerous. There's one more thing in the files you haven't found yet. The buyers. The people they sell the children to. I have names, addresses, financial records. Everything you need to destroy them all. She leaned closer to the camera. But if you go after them, you'll become what they are. A killer. I don't want that for you. Take the evidence to the FBI, the media, anyone who will listen. Let the system handle it. She paused, her voice softening. But if the system fails you like it failed me, if they get away with it all, then you do what you have to do. Just remember who you were before all this. Don't let them turn you into something you'll hate. The video ended, but Ronan wasn't listening to Lita's final advice anymore. They'd killed Augie simply for asking questions. An innocent man was dead because of their paranoia and cruelty. The system Lita trusted had failed her. It had failed Augie. It would fail every child they trafficked until someone stopped them permanently. Ronan deleted the video and pocketed the USB drive. He'd heard enough advice about doing the right thing. Now it was time to do the necessary thing. That Ronan's war began with information. He spent 2 weeks analyzing the buyer network from Lita's hidden files, working 18-hour days in his motel room. The customers were exactly what he'd expected: wealthy politicians, business leaders, and criminals from around the world. People with enough money and power to believe they could buy anything, including children. The files were extensive, detailed, damning. Photos of buyers at pickup locations, financial transactions that traced money from offshore accounts to the trafficking network, even audio recordings of negotiations where children were discussed like livestock. He started with the domestic buyers first, leaking their identities to investigative journalists at 3 different news organizations. The package included everything: names, photos, financial records, evidence of their crimes laid out in organized folders that any reporter could understand. Point 2 of the reporters disappeared within days of receiving the information. Their editors claimed they'd taken sudden leaves of absence for personal reasons, but Ronan knew better. The organizations they'd exposed had reach and influence. The third reporter, a woman named Janet Kumar from an independent online publication called Truth Seekers, published everything. Kumar was smart, experienced, and fearless. She'd exposed corruption in 3 different countries and survived 2 assassination attempts. She knew how to protect sources and publish stories that couldn't be suppressed. The story exploded across social media within hours. Names, photographs, financial records, everything needed to destroy lives and careers. Kumar had protected her sources well, routing the story through multiple servers and publishing simultaneously on platforms across 3 countries. Exclusive. International child trafficking ring exposed. Buyers list includes U.S. politicians, business leaders. The headline dominated news cycles for days. The immediate results exceeded Ronan's expectations. Within 48 hours, Senator Silas Redd's staff began resigning en masse. His chief of staff released a statement citing irreconcilable differences with recent developments, followed by his communications director, policy advisor, and 3 senior aides. Redd's office looked like a sinking ship with rats abandoning the vessel. Nova Beringer went into hiding. Her office claimed she was taking a brief vacation for health reasons, but Ronan's surveillance showed her fleeing to a safe house in the mountains west of Asheville. She was running scared, abandoning her public duties to avoid the growing scrutiny. Ronan Slate's world imploded when his personal accounts were hacked and emptied. Ronan had used the man's own security flaws against him, draining his offshore accounts and donating the money to legitimate child welfare organizations. $15 million vanished overnight, transferred to organizations that actually helped children instead of exploiting them. The humiliation was secondary to the financial damage. Slate had lost his fortune and his reputation in a single day, but Miles Kettering remained defiant. He held press conferences, denied everything, and hired the best lawyers money could buy. His Future Hope Foundation released statements claiming they were victims of a coordinated smear campaign by political enemies and disgruntled former employees. These accusations are baseless and politically motivated, Kettering said during a televised interview. We've helped thousands of children over the years. Our records are open to any legitimate investigation. Kettering was the leader, the foundation that held the operation together. Take him down, and the others would crumble. Ronan spent 3 days tracking Kettering's movements using surveillance equipment he'd acquired from Lita's contacts. The man had retreated to a cabin outside Boone, North Carolina, a remote property he owned under a shell company called Mountain View Holdings, perfect for a private conversation. Using Lita's surveillance techniques and equipment, Ronan confirmed that Kettering was alone except for 2 bodyguards. Professional security, but not military trained. Men who were used to intimidating business rivals, not fighting for their lives. Manageable. The plan was simple. Get inside, get Kettering talking, record everything, then end it. The cabin sat on 50 acres of forested mountain land, accessible only by a single winding road that climbed through dense pines and rocky outcroppings. Ronan approached on foot through the woods, carrying a pistol he'd purchased years ago for home protection and rarely touched since he'd never fired at a human being, but maintenance work had taught him to use tools properly. A gun was just another tool, with specific functions and predictable results when operated correctly. The bodyguards were careless, overconfident in their isolation. They stayed inside watching a basketball game while their employer made phone calls in the back room. Ronan could hear the television through the windows, a playoff game between teams that meant nothing to him. He disabled their black SUV first, cutting brake lines and removing spark plugs with tools from his kit. If they tried to leave quickly, they'd find themselves stranded on a mountain road with no cell phone coverage. Entry was easier than expected. The cabin security system was expensive but poorly installed, with obvious vulnerabilities that Lita's files had taught him to exploit. Motion sensors with blind spots, cameras with predictable sweep patterns, door sensors that could be bypassed with basic electrical knowledge. He entered through a basement window and made his way upstairs, moving quietly through rooms that smelled of expensive whiskey and cigar smoke. The kind of place where rich men came to feel powerful and untouchable. The bodyguards were drinking beer and arguing about a referee's call. Neither was paying attention to their surroundings, too comfortable in their supposed security. Ronan appeared in the living room doorway with the pistol drawn, steady, and sure in his mechanic's hands. Hands where I can see them. Both men froze. They were armed, but their weapons were holstered under their jackets. Ronan had the advantage of surprise and positioning, with clear lines of sight to both targets. On the floor, face down. Now, the larger man started to speak. "Listen, buddy, I'm not your buddy. On the floor, or I start shooting." They complied, recognizing something in his voice that told them this wasn't a negotiation. Ronan zip-tied their hands behind their backs using restraints he'd brought, then secured their feet for good measure. "Stay quiet, and you might live through this." He moved toward the back room, where Kettering was still talking on the phone, his voice carrying through the partially opened door. "Don't care what it costs," Kettering was saying. "Find out who's behind this media campaign and eliminate them. I want this problem solved permanently. Use whatever resources you need." Ronan kicked open the door. Kettering spun around, still holding the phone to his ear. "Hello, Miles." Kettering's face went white as paper. He dropped the phone, the plastic clattering on the hardwood floor. "Who are you? What do you want?" "I'm Ronan Ellery. You killed my wife." Understanding dawned in Kettering's eyes, followed immediately by calculation. The man was already looking for angles, ways to manipulate the situation. "Lita, you're Lita's husband." "Was." Past tense. "Thanks to you and your friends." Kettering tried to regain his composure, straightening his expensive shirt and attempting his boardroom demeanor. "Look, whatever she told you, she didn't tell me anything. She protected me by lying to me for 8 years. But she kept records, detailed records. I know everything." Ronan pulled out his phone and started a live stream to Janet Kumar's secure server. The reporter had agreed to broadcast whatever he sent her, no questions asked. "What are you doing?" "Giving you a chance to tell the truth. The whole truth. For once in your miserable life." Kettering's eyes darted between the phone and the gun. His mind was working, trying to find some way out of the situation. "You're recording this. The world deserves to know what you are." For a moment, neither man spoke. The only sounds were the basketball game from the living room and wind through the pine trees outside. Then Kettering's facade cracked completely, revealing the monster underneath. "She was broken when we found her," he said, his voice bitter and cold. Lita was a damaged little girl who'd been bounced between foster homes her whole life. No family, no connections, no one who would miss her if she disappeared. We gave her purpose, structure, a family of sorts. You gave her a job trafficking children. We saved her from herself. She had skills, identity creation, logistics, psychological manipulation. Natural talents that were being wasted on petty cons and credit card fraud. Without us, she would have been a low-level criminal her whole life. Ronan kept the camera rolling, letting Kettering condemn himself with his own words. "And the children you trafficked?" "Product," Kettering said coldly, his mask completely gone now. "Supply and demand. There's always been a market for what we provided. We simply organized it more efficiently than the competition. Hundreds of children. Thousands over the years. Business is business." Lita understood that until she got sentimental. Started talking about getting out, exposing the operation. She wanted to play hero, save the children she'd helped us acquire. Kettering's smile was reptilian, the expression of a predator discussing prey. "We couldn't allow that kind of thinking spread. So you had her killed. Nova handled the arrangements. Made it look natural. Your wife simply went to sleep and never woke up. Peaceful, really. more merciful than she deserved after betraying us. You poisoned her. Untraceable compounds delivered through her morning coffee. Medical professionals never look for what they don't expect to find. A young, healthy woman with a sudden aneurysm? Tragic, but these things happen. Kettering was enjoying himself now, proud of his organization's efficiency. She never felt a thing. One moment she was lying next to you, probably dreaming about her pathetic attempt at redemption, and the next she was gone. Clean, simple, effective. Ronan felt something cold and final settle in his chest. This man had murdered his wife and felt no remorse about it. Kettering saw human beings as commodities to be bought and sold, problems to be eliminated. Any last words for your audience? Kettering looked directly into the camera with the confidence of a man who believed his power made him untouchable. You can't stop what we built. We have people everywhere, law enforcement, government, media. Kill me, and 10 more will take my place. The market will always exist, and someone will always fill it. He leaned forward, speaking directly to the camera. Do you think this is the only operation? We're just one network among dozens. Hundreds, probably. This is bigger than you can imagine, and you're just one man with a gun. Maybe, but you won't be part of it. Ronan pulled the trigger once. The bullet caught Kettering in the center of his chest, dropping him instantly. The man's expression of arrogant confidence froze on his face as he fell. The live stream captured everything. Ronan ended the recording and sent copies to multiple news outlets, then placed an anonymous call to the local sheriff's department from a burner phone. There's been a shooting at the Mountain View cabin on Deer Trail Road. 1 dead, 2 restrained. The shooter is gone. By the time police arrived, Ronan was gone. The video of Kettering's confession spread like wildfire across social media and news networks. Within hours, it had been viewed millions of times worldwide. The man's own words condemned him and provided evidence for dozens of ongoing investigations. Major news networks picked up the story, playing excerpts during primetime broadcasts. Social media exploded with outrage and demand for justice. The hashtag Justice for Lita began trending globally. The surviving conspirators fell quickly. Nova Barringer was arrested 3 days later when she tried to flee the country. Airport security at Charlotte Douglas found her with forged documents and $2 million in cash stuffed into designer luggage. She blamed everything on Kettering, claiming she'd been blackmailed into cooperation. I was protecting my family, she told reporters as they led her away in handcuffs. Miles Kettering threatened to have my daughter killed if I didn't help him. I'm a victim here, too. Nobody believed her. Senator Silas Redd suffered a different fate. Faced with certain exposure and criminal charges, he held a press conference where he confessed to taking bribes and facilitating the trafficking operation. Tears streamed down his face as he read from prepared remarks. I have betrayed the trust of my constituents and the innocent children I swore to protect. I cannot live with the weight of my crimes. Then he walked into his garage and started his car with the door closed. They found his body the next morning, a note of confession clutched in his hand. Carl Fleet tried to disappear, but made the mistake of accessing one of her hidden bank accounts in Switzerland. Federal agents were waiting when she arrived at the Zurich bank, having been tipped off by Ronan's anonymous messages. She was extradited within a week and faced charges in 3 countries. Rowan Slate proved more resourceful. He managed to escape the country using stolen identities and offshore resources, disappearing into the international underground where money could buy new lives. But Ronan wasn't finished with him. Every few months, Slate would find his new identity exposed, his accounts frozen, his location revealed to local authorities. The man lived in constant fear, never knowing when his past would catch up with him. Ronan had become his personal demon, a ghost that haunted every attempt at a new life. The trafficking network collapsed completely. Law enforcement agencies in 12 countries coordinated raids that rescued over 300 children and arrested dozens of buyers and facilitators. The Future Hope Foundation was dissolved, its assets seized and distributed to legitimate children's charities. Ronan watched it all unfold from a cabin in Oregon, purchased under a false identity he'd created using Lita's methods. He'd learned her techniques, well, how to disappear, how to create new lives, how to become invisible when necessary. The property sat on 20 acres of pine forest, remote enough to provide privacy, but close enough to civilization for supplies. Solar panels provided power, a well-supplied water, and a generator offered backup for emergencies. But he wasn't invisible to everyone. Janet Kumar found him 6 months after Kettering's death. She appeared at his door one evening with a bottle of whiskey and a knowing smile. "Thought you might want to know the final count," she said. Ronan let her in, recognizing a kindred spirit. Kumar had risked her life to publish the truth when others had stayed silent. "What count?" "Children recovered. Arrests made. Lives saved." She handed him a folder thick with documents. 412 children rescued worldwide. 87 perpetrators in custody. The buyer's network is completely dismantled. Ronan paged through the folder. Photos of children reunited with families, news articles about convictions, court documents detailing asset seizures. Justice served efficiently and permanently. "How did you find me? I'm good at my job. But don't worry, I'm not here to expose you. I'm here to thank you." Kumar poured 2 glasses of whiskey from the bottle. She'd brought good whiskey, the kind that cost more than most people made in a week. "The system failed those children. Failed your wife. You did what needed to be done when everyone else was too afraid or too corrupt to act. I became a killer. You became what the situation required. There's a difference." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the Oregon mountains through the cabin's windows. "What will you do now?" Kumar asked. "Keep working. There are always more monsters, more networks, more children who need someone to fight for them. You could have a normal life. New identity, clean slate. Start over somewhere else." Ronan shook his head. "This is my life now. My purpose." Lita started something she couldn't finish. "I'm going to finish it." After Kumar left, Ronan sat on his porch watching the stars emerge in the clear mountain sky. He thought about Lita, about the lies she'd told and the truth she'd hidden. She tried to protect him by keeping him ignorant, but her death had forced him to become something he'd never intended to be. Every year on the anniversary of Lita's death, Ronan mailed evidence packages to law enforcement agencies and journalists. Information about officials who'd been bought, investigators who'd been silenced, cases that had been buried. He'd become a permanent watchdog, using Lita's network and methods to ensure that similar operations never took root again. The work was solitary and dangerous, but it was necessary. The market Kettering had spoken about still existed, would always exist. But now it had an enemy who understood its methods and had the skills to fight it. Ronan Ellery had found his purpose in the locked side of his wife's life. He would never forgive what they'd done to her, and he would never stop hunting those who profited from human suffering. The machine was broken, but the mechanic was still working, and he had all the time in the world.